Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me today. My name is Alex Bolan, aka Jay. I work for Bitdefender. And today we're going to talk about bad cloud implementations in IoT, and essentially how to leverage those bad cloud implementations to do all kinds of crazy stuff with a lot of IoTs. We've kind of been doing this for the past 6 years, and we've been looking at cloud platforms for the past 3, maybe 3.5. And the situation, except for maybe 1 or 2 companies, is disastrous, to say the least. Essentially, which is why we came up with this. We kind of cut this small clip about what happens when we send reports to vendors. And essentially, this is kind of what we imagine happens at vendor HQ.
You know the cloud? Fuck! Nobody understands the cloud.
Yeah. Basically, that's kind of it, yeah. So, as we're going to see further on, it's very close to reality. It's very close to what's happening over there at vendor HQ. So, I'm going to start with something that I really like to say before I get into any kind of IoT talks, is defining IoT, right? And I see IoT as hardware plus operating system plus app plus cloud. Now, what if I told you that an IoT is like a WordPress website? Who, just a quick show of hands, who can see the connection between an IoT and a WordPress website? Not bad, not bad. Because essentially we have these stacks, like, if you remember VuFTPD, Red Hat 6.2, and hardware as a stack, or hardware plus Windows operating system IS 5.0, or hardware plus Windows plus RDP, and so on and so forth. In the IoT case, we also have a mobile app and a cloud, which essentially expands the attack surface by a lot. Now, if you want to get into IoT hacking, so the nice guys from Tenable before me was kind enough to kind of get into what to look for when doing IoT security research. So Telnet is still a thing in 2019. Look for mobile app and device communication. I'm not going to stay too much on this. You can get the slides if you want a quick cheat sheet on what to look for when doing IoT security research. But look for command injection, directory traversal, and buffer overflows, because in the IoT space, I don't know if you knew this, ASLR does not work. Just out of curiosity, how many here knew that ASLR does not work in IoT? It's because, quite a lot, and it's because for ASLR to work, binaries need to be compiled with a flag called PI, position independent executable, which actually takes quite a bunch of CPU cycles to work, and which is why literally all the IoTs that we've looked at had binaries compiled without PI, which meant that if we found any kind of buffer overflows, we had predictable RC. And yeah. Also worth mentioning, a lot of the vendors use a lot of shared code in their devices, which means that if you find an SDK that's implemented into one IoT, well, essentially, and you find a vulnerability in that, there's a good chance that it's going to work on 20 more other vendors. Obviously, this is common stuff. We've seen it all over the place. Credential reuse, private key reuse, backdoors, or as they call them, service interfaces, or support interfaces. Yeah, that's right. And look for cloud chatter. How does the mobile app talk to the cloud, and so on and so forth. Now, if you want to get a chance to have a look at the firmware, and there is no way to get into it right off the bat, look for serial interfaces, and it's very easy to do boot hijacks on most IoTs. If you know how to do a password reset on Linux by stopping grub and doing init equals bin sh to be dropped into a shell, it's pretty much the same thing with IoTs. You just stop the bootloader via the serial interface, and you pass all those flags to the bootloader, and they're going to drop you into a shell that you can use to change the password and then get access to the firmware. So this is kind of basic stuff that you want to know if you want to get into hacking IoTs. Now to the topic at hand. Traditionally, botnets, traditional botnets, because they're still happening, work by iterating IP addresses, trying to see if they're telnet enabled, brute forcing a root password, or if there's a web interface, look for some command injection into the web interface. It's like predefined like 20 exploits that they're trying, and they go by IP and IP and IP. Now this is going to stop working soon, essentially because most IoTs in nowadays have a different implementation. They use cloud, and they're like behind NAT. There's no direct connection from the internet, and cloud is being used for managing all the IoTs from that vendor. And the way that's implemented today in like 99% of the cases is this. Also, yeah, very important, they have a modular architecture. So when vendors implement this cloud platform, usually the way they do it is that they go to IoT cloud platform from company X, and they say, we want to use your cloud platform. And company X says, sure, pay us money, and the company pays them money, and they integrate that cloud platform into their IoTs. They get an agent that they embed into the firmware, and that agent talks to the cloud platform. And I'm sure you know there's like dozens of IoT cloud platforms being advertised everywhere, security conferences, IoT conferences, and so on and so forth. But mostly, they have a very similar architecture, most of them. They use a 32-bit, sometimes larger, sometimes smaller, device identifier to talk to facilitate the communication between the application and the device. Essentially, the app tells the cloud, I want to talk to device ID and 32-bit string. Now, that string is not easy to brute force, right? It's quite long, it's pretty unpredictable. Let's call it safe. So as I was saying, all communication is done by using that device ID, and most of them actually have a decent usage of encryption. We've seen even unique keys per device, and they have like AES 256 and a number of encryption mechanisms between the IoT and the cloud, between the app and the cloud. We've seen certificate pinning being used, and props to that. And as I was saying, this is kind of a generic description, but this kind of applies to roughly 90% of all we've analyzed. Actually, it applies to 100% of all that we've analyzed in IoT. We're just saying it's 90% because we didn't get a chance to look at everything, right? There's a lot of IoTs. So that's great for all intents and purposes. I mean, pretty secure. But as we have come to realize upon a closer look, not all cloud implementations are very well implemented. And as we're going to see, the cloud platform itself is pretty decently designed. However, the implementation by the vendor is not that decent. So there's no authentication in this architecture. All that's authentication is the key exchange on SSL, on TLS, sorry, and that device ID. That's kind of the identifier, the authentication that's being used for talking to an IoT connected to that cloud. And some vendors actually use additional implementations and unique symmetric keys. However, some other vendors add on top of that other implementations of their own, like we've seen and we're going to see today, something called a client ID for facilitating multiple device IDs per one client. And just so you don't get afraid, we're going to get into practical, hands-on analysis about this. Now, a few words on S3 buckets. I'm sure you're familiar with the way they work. I wasn't. But I've talked to some of our cloud guys, and they're telling me that traditionally in S3, the way it kind of works is that a device creates a file, stores it on S3 on a path, and then relays that path to the mobile app that needs to access that file. So essentially, the security measure here is that you do not know the path of the file or the file name that's being passed to the app, and the app knows, okay, I can access that file in that path. And ideally, you cannot list the contents of an S3 bucket. You can just access that file. You cannot do list in a folder. Um, or, as I was saying, you shouldn't be able to do that. But bad implementations means that we've seen an alarming number of vendors that not only enable you to do a list in your own bucket, they enable you to do a list in all the buckets of all their customers, and you can do it recursively and see all the things of all their customers. And unfortunately, this is something, and I want to touch on this really quick. This is something that is very difficult to talk about because from a legal standpoint, you are not allowed to research that. You are not allowed to go that up one level and see if you can go outside of your own bucket. But there's no way to prove that you can go outside of your own bucket unless you try. So a friend of mine tried, and using a device from a very popular baby monitor company, and supposedly that friend was able to see the recordings of all the baby monitors of all the customers of that company. And he tried reaching out to them, and they did not reply. A few words on MQTT. MQTT, I was not familiar with MQTT up until a few months ago. Essentially, MQTT is some sort of a server, much like Torrent, I'm told, which essentially says that the device registers to the server, and there's a tree structure that allows the device to say, okay, I can broadcast these topics, they're called, right? And it's like /vendor, /device ID, and the /topic, where the topic is like, I'm online, I'm offline, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. And then it tells that to the server, and then the mobile app knows that it can register to those topics, those specific topics. So ideally, it's a very efficient way for the mobile app to stay in touch with the device and get like notifications, get configs, see the device status, and all that stuff. But another big flaw that we've seen in implementation, much like with the S3 bucket, is that you could basically tap into the / and then get notifications from all the device IDs and all the devices from that vendor. And chaining these two together with another which are simulating the mobile app, essentially you can do a targeted attack and just see the video feeds of a specific user that you want to target. And it's as simple as hack Irene's baby monitor. Yeah. Again, purely hypothetical. You register to / on that vendor on MQTT. You look for all the notifications, you harvest all the device IDs that you see, and then you emulate the mobile app to pull the config for that device ID. And once you validate that that device ID is correlated with the email address that you want to target, you go to S3, and you look up that device ID for the recordings. I hope that this makes sense to you guys. It does make sense for my friend. And unfortunately, it does work. And of course, it's a purely hypothetical scenario. Anyway, I just wanted to fit this in because it's kind of tricky to talk about it. So I'm just putting 2 slides about it, just because I think people need to know about this. And if you're doing IoT security research, look into directory traversal in both S3 and MQTT. You're going to find a lot of companies that are vulnerable to this. And yeah, fun times. Another paper that we've published was on the Emacs smart power outlet. There's no problem talking about this because it's already public. Essentially, their device ID was not even a 32-bit string. It was the MAC address of the device. And if you knew the MAC address, you could like turn the power outlet on and off. And that's kind of tricky because it's actually being heavily used in a lot of enterprises, companies, and I'm scared to say hospitals. It's still vulnerable today. They published a patch. Nobody applied it because the usability on their upgrade system is very faulty. We tried to apply it, and we couldn't. And we actually intended to apply the patch, and we couldn't apply it. And we know a few things about how computers work. I mean, supposedly we're supposed to be able to do it. And yeah, you can essentially turn the power outlet on and off. You can get actually a command injection on it, relayed by the cloud, and get a connect back shell from it. And if you're in the same Wi-Fi as the power outlet, you can actually sniff. They don't use encryption, they use encoding. And it took us like 5 minutes to decode that traffic. And you get like their email credentials, like their Gmail account and password and so on and so forth. Because the power outlet doesn't have an SMTP server, it's using the user's Gmail account and password to send notification emails. So again, fun times. And now to the topic at hand. For our demo today, we're going to use a popular security camera that we've kind of dissected a while back. And it's called the Guardzilla Smart Security Camera. And we have one over there on the audio-video table pointing at me. So we took a look at the mobile app behavior. And the first thing that we noticed is that after the authentication, we were assigned a client ID. 6-digit number. Can anybody see what's wrong with this picture? Oh, yeah. And I mean, I can stop the talk right here, but I'm actually going to show you what you can do with this client ID, because it's more fun that way. So it cannot be changed. It's incremented by 1 for each account. And it's all you need to pull stuff from the Guardzilla cloud on the things associated with that client ID. Yeah, it's worth mentioning that the post requests are actually sent to the cloud encrypted with AES-256 CBC mode, but the encryption key and IV initialization vector are hard-coded in the app, so you can pull those, and you can use those to script the requests to the Guardzilla cloud, so which is actually what we did. Yeah. So this is how a post request to the Guardzilla cloud with the client ID looks like. You send the request, you use the encryption key and the IV from the app, create a small Python script, send the request to the Guardzilla cloud, tell me information about that user ID, and it sends back, and this is a more beautiful format, device ID and password, which is what we're interested in. And once we have that device ID, we can do magical stuff with it. And just as a first demo, I have here a shell opened, and it still works, on a machine someplace in, hang on. Sorry, without my name. There we go. I'm in Canada. So just to show that everything that I'm going to do is fully remote to a camera behind 2 firewalls here, maybe 3. I don't know. It's like my modem, then the Derbycon access point, and then the Mqtt access point. Should be secure enough, right? So I'm going to go to BD Research, Guardzilla, and the first thing we're going to do is try to pull information about my user ID, right? So Python, get UID new. This is mine, 408.311. I'm just going to beautify it a little bit. And there we go. We have, this is Bug Boy, that guy over there, and this is the password. So obviously, if you want to do it for 408.312, or if you want to do it for 105, or if you want to do it for 500,641, you can. And you can pull the devices from all those customers from the vendor. So cool. That's, yeah. Yeah, also worth mentioning that password that you saw is going to be needed when interacting with the device. The user can change the password. However, it's going to be kind of useless because once you pull the information for the cloud, part of that information is the device ID and the password. So if the user changes the password to some, I mean, the user like security conscious, like you and I, and so like 40 characters alphanumeric password, very strong. Unfortunately, it's going to be useless because I'm going to be able to pull that information from the Godzilla cloud, and the Godzilla cloud is going to tell me that device's password. So yeah, tough. You can do an account takeover. So there's an API on the Godzilla cloud that has several functions. One of them is change email address and change password. There's no notification of that. And you can do a full camera takeover. I don't know why you would want to do that, because the person owning it is going to see that they're not going to have access to it. They're just going to reset it to defaults. But I just included it here because you can do it. But more fun than that is that you can have access to the audio and video feed. And for that purpose, we've actually written a small client that connects to the camera and pipes the video feed to VLC. It's a little or a lot buggy, but I'm going to show it to you anyway. So I'm going to simulate trying to hack somebody's camera. First of all, I'm going to pull the information about the camera. What I need is the device ID and the password, right? So I have those. Again, I can do this for any client ID. After that, I use my little client here. And see what we'll see. And there am I. So no authentication required. I mean, some authentication required, but you pull the credentials from the Godzilla cloud. So it's as simple as that. And unfortunately, you can do that with everybody. Am I moving? Again, buggy. Sorry. OK, so this is the hard way, but there's an easy way. And the easy way is this. OK, check this out. There's an API, another API. It's called send invite, in which you're allowed to send an invite to somebody to see your camera. And you use the user ID and the device ID. And I think it's fun to mention that there's no notification to the owner whatsoever. So the owner has no indication that somebody has been invited to view their camera. So for demo number 2, I'm going to use modern technology and my phone. There we go. Open up the Godzilla app. And go to Manage Cameras. And essentially invite myself. So again, we wrote a small Python script that emulates the connection with the Godzilla cloud, right? So it's like invite for client ID 408311, the device ID that we pulled earlier, and this is our email address, which is logged on to this mobile phone. So once we do this, in a few moments, with hopes and prayers to the demo gods, there we go. So accept, and now there we go. We have a yeah. So the easy way has better quality. Our VLC pipe was kind of damaged, but it's just a POC, right? So we didn't want to invest too much time into that. So fun times, huh? So far. Okay. So close you. Not going to delete anymore. Moving on. I would like to, by the way, say thank you. Some guy gave me a Smirnoff Ice yesterday and said that I'm supposed to drink it on stage, so thanks to that guy. Okay. Now, easy does it. So now that we know that we can essentially pull the information from all the cameras of all the customers from the vendor, one of the magical things about cloud platforms when it comes to IoT is that they relay input to the IoT. And that input is going to be parsed by some binaries on the IoT or some scripts. So essentially, when we interact with the cloud and send something to the camera, we can get command injection, buffer overflows, and all the good stuff, and get command execution on the device, as we will see. So the first thing that we discovered was a buffer overflow in the cloud agent. As I was saying, a lot of the IoT vendors get the cloud from a different vendor. And that particular cloud agent running on the firmware of the device was from the Calais platform, wherever they are, and which is a combination of P2P and relay server used to bypass NAT restrictions. And the application running on BusyBox was main v514.exe, because why not? Why shouldn't you have exe running on BusyBox? And upon inspection, we identified a function vulnerable to out-of-bounds writes, which is called TK, set device model requeue request handle. And essentially, the code looks like this. This is from us trying to kind of disassemble it with IDA. And it looks very, very ugly. And after we kind of did everything that we were supposed to do, somebody told me that the actual code was available on GitHub. So yeah, but this is what we're looking for. You see that string copy over there. We're going to overflow v28 and v29, which are actually called different in the real code. And after that, we have system at 81B80. And you see we have system over here. So essentially, this is our exploit. We're going to exploit the avsend IO control function. We're going to send it the command that's relative to that particular memory address. And we're going to use that memory address to call system, which is like the next one in stack. So the main binary is going to crash, but it's going to stick around with us for a shell. And we tested it on this. So we're going to try to get a shell from Canada in Louisville, Kentucky, right? So for that, we're going to open up a listener. On port 4444. And this is the exploit. Essentially, this one we made in C. So wish me luck. Oh, there we go. So now we have a shell on that camera over there, and it's that simple. Again, behind NAT, behind like 3 NATs, right? All relayed by their cloud. So this is something, something. If anybody wants me to run a command on it, now is your chance. I still need it. I'm going to do a talk, this same talk. I'm going to do it next month, I think. So, yeah. I don't know. I mean, what's that? Anyway. So, yeah. Let me just reboot it to make sure that it's going to be stable. So yeah, obviously you can get this type of connect back shell from like most of the devices by this vendor. And given the fact that we are at 408.311 and a friend of mine iterated some of the other client IDs and ended up at about 500,000 and 540,000 like 6 months ago, and they didn't try since then, and they're getting new customers every day. You know, granting that some of the customers may leave but most of them won't because usually people don't change their security system so easily. I would say that and there's like 2 or 3 devices per customer. I would say that we're looking at least 500,000 devices easy that you can get a shell on or unauthorized access. So yeah, it's kind of bad. Now, another RC that we found in another version of their product, I don't have it with me here, unfortunately, is a command injection. The device itself supports remote upgrade. And the way it does that is that you send it an upgrade command with an URL that only needs to be valid because it's going to be parsed by a system command that's going to connect to it and disconnect if it doesn't work. But the thing is, it's going to be parsed by, I'm just going to go to the code, tar. So you simply go to the Garzilla Cloud, send the upgrade command and your command injection as a parameter and the URL that works, and you're going to get your command injection executed on the device. So yeah. As bonus, they had an open AWS bucket, which they fixed. They didn't? You're the guys that published before us about the AWS bucket? No. You know you forced our hand? So we were sitting on the Garzilla research for a few months, and then when we had the AWS bucket as well, and then these guys publish, and they published on NetSec as well, and they're like, okay, now we got to do it. So we publish everything. And I don't know about you guys, but I got a call from a director at Garzilla a few days after that. I was in the Philippines, and I was asking him, but do you not pen test your stuff before you publish? Well, sure we do. Did you pay a lot of money for that pen test? Because saying that you have like a 6-digit client ID is really not that difficult, you know? Anyway. So let me edit here, not fixed. Yeah. Okay, so to sum up, usually starting from that client ID that you can like enumerate, you can get all the information from all the devices, from all the customers from this particular vendor. And that's bad, okay? Okay, as takeaways, this is for, you know, probably other types of conference like RSA. IoT is a huge attack surface, and you should pen test your devices before you put them into the market and blah, blah, blah. But I think that the key takeaway that I would want you guys to have is that you can leverage the cloud implementation to bypass NAT. All IoTs are moving to the cloud, all of them, and we've done research on a number of them. And unfortunately, we couldn't publish everything just yet. I'm going to have a dishonorable mention after this slide. But trust me, you can use the cloud to like parse input to the device and get connect back shells, unauthenticated authentication bypasses, and all that good stuff. So, and yeah, it's still trivial to find RCs. If you just extract the firmware in like 9 out of 10 cases, you're going to find buffer overflows and command injection, a lot of them. Now, this honorable mention, so far we've published only a fraction of our research because of legal issues. So just as a curiosity and a question to the audience, how many of you work for corporations? A lot. And how many of you are independent researchers? It's literally the same kind of feedback that I had at IoT Village at DEF CON. Like 2 or 3 people were independent researchers, and the vast majority were working for a corporation. And I don't know how it's the case with you guys, but at a corporation that I know of, the legal department kind of put a gag on some of the things that we wanted to publish. So one of the purposes of this talk is to kind of stimulate some of the research in this direction, and especially in stuff that can be hacked en masse. most IoT talks that I'm seeing are about hacking something that's in your house, or it's perimeter based. You have access to the Wi-Fi, you have access to the Bluetooth area or whatever. I think that these type of hacks are more, I don't want to say more important, but I'm going to say more important because it can literally lead to new next generation botnets. You can have like 500,000 devices hacked like this, and the bad guys are going to be able to take down one knows what else. And I mean, all I'm saying is that there needs to be more research done on mass hacks, things that can have an impact on a global scale. So I'm going to say that it's easier for any kind of company to go after another company than after an independent researcher. So independent researchers, I think, have an easier time publishing and reporting vulnerabilities. We don't mind sharing some of the private stuff that we have. And if you want our assistance, we can definitely help you with that. We have, again, a number of research that we are not able to put out that really has a huge impact, still has a huge impact, still unpatched. And we're trying to find out how to kind of get it out there so they can get their stuff together and patch their stuff. Well, with that in mind, I think I'm a little bit ahead of schedule, but I can open up if there's any Q&A. If not, So, any questions? Cool. No. Oh, one question.
What kind of methodological changes would be, more, drastically secure? I mean, obviously, a lot of the attack surfaces using, public cloud, using storage, buckets, and whatnot. I mean, things like maybe the, outbound, rules as if all these devices are limited to the LAN, or users have to be getting into their networks. I mean, I don't know. I'm just thinking, is there some methodological way that could be just a,
Okay, that's actually an excellent question, because the answer is, and I'm sorry to say this, there's not much that you can do. These are not devices that you port forward and access through a port forward. These are devices that are managed, and you access their feed and their functionalities relayed by the vendor cloud. If you cut the connection with the vendor cloud, the device stops working. And the connection to the vendor cloud is legitimate. And it's also fully encrypted, so you're not going to be able to IDS it and do deep packet inspection and see my I don't know, buffer overflow or command injection payload. So, I mean, the only thing that you might be able to see, but you're not going to see that in consumer products, is the connection to the connect back shell to my server, presumably, right? So there's a normal connection to the vendor cloud, but at some point, the device makes a connection to my server in Canada on port 4000, 4444. You might see that, but you're going to need to have like a network anomaly detection product at home, which I doubt many people do.
it's TLS to the
Yes.
vendor, right?
Yeah.
Okay. But it's listening and taking SSH actions.
No.
Right on.
No. So most devices now are all of them locked down, and the only connectivity is between device and cloud. So there's no open ports. In most cases, there's no open ports. There's not even a web interface in most new devices, right? They're trying to cut down the attack surface as much as possible. So this is a good implementation for all intents and purposes, talking only to the cloud and not allowing other connections. But it kind of disables you as a blue team, let's say, to kind of pick up whenever somebody's trying to exploit the device or have unauthorized access to it. So I guess the only advice that I can give is pen test it before you buy it or something. Go into Best Buy and tell them, can I have a look at this before the purchase? I might break it, but it's for the greater good.
Just because it works with the cloud provider, you have to use that service. I mean, you could, run ZoneMinder or something locally to have the camera.
So again, you're thinking about old types of cameras, right? Think Nest, think Ring, think Godzilla. You cannot directly interact with it. So even though you set up firewall rules or whatever, the only way to manage and access the camera is through the mobile app relayed by the cloud. So the connection doesn't come from another IP address. The connection comes from the vendor cloud to the device.
When you did the buffer overflow and you got a root,
No, that was relayed by the cloud. So I talked to the Godzilla cloud. I was in Canada. How could I talk to the device from Canada? I was on a VPS way far away from here. So from that VPS, I talked to the cloud and told the cloud to tell the device to send a connect back shell to me in Canada. So look, just so you know, I'm not lying. This was the shell that I used, right? And this IP address that I have here is not my laptop, I'm actually logged on from this IP address, from 12. This is my current IP address. So this is my laptop's IP address, right? So when I got the shell, I got it completely far away, no direct connection. Any other questions? Please. I'm sorry, the floor screeched. That's such a tough question because, you know, correct is an absolute term, right? Better, yes. But correct, you don't know if it's correct. I mean, as far as we managed to find something in literally all the devices that we've analyzed. That something might have had a higher impact or a lower impact, might be more difficult to exploit or easier to exploit. This one is easy. We did a bit of research on a very popular Asian vendor that I'm not at liberty to disclose, and they had like an insanely well put in place system for authenticated communication with the device, right? So for example, unique keys per each device. So I couldn't use the keys from my app to interact with the device and with another person's device. I could interact with my own, but I couldn't interact with another person's device and so on and so forth. But we managed to find a way to kind of kill that encryption, right? So you send a null byte at a certain API, and that kind of enables us at the second stage to bypass encryption and be able to talk to another device. It wasn't as trivial as the Godzilla implementation, but still not impossible. So yeah, we've seen much better implementations, but unfortunately not a lot of them. Yeah, I would say that any company that's, for example, Nest or Ring, they're okay. Not perfect, but okay. But why? Because they're on bug bounty programs, there's people hammering at them all the time, and they have a very responsible team that answers vulnerability disclosure, so props to them. Unfortunately, these are like very few. Anything else? Well, thank you so much for joining me, and yeah.